Who's the best combat legendary? Who should you invest in? Who are the best budget options? This is every legendary ranked. Let's talk about how I ranked them and why. Now, a legendary unit's most common threats are other legendaries, so that's the matchups we're going to measure each of these against. Each unit is given an Omni +6 in the simulation, and they're awarded 1 point for a win, -1 for a loss, and 0 points for a draw. We'll do that for both the player and the enemy phase. At the end, we'll include scoring and support capabilities. I'm also throwing Duo Chrom in because he's an honorary legendary. But before we begin, let me know in the comments who your favorite legendary is. I don't care about who you're supposed to like, tell me who you like using. Let's talk about the player phase ratings first. It's interesting looking at the old versus the new legendaries. The days of Ike and Fjorm are long past. We'll look further into this, but in general you want to pick units from tier 0 or tier 1. The drop-off is quite sharp, and there are very few legendaries that can contribute based on their supportive skills alone. Supportive units are not what they used to be in the age of duos that can function in supportive and combat roles. I'm going to get into the units here shortly, but there are a couple of big surprises that I want to go over. The first is the difference between legendary Deirdre and legendary Sigurd. Rewind back to the year of their release, and Sigurd was the hands-down pick for the best legendary of his generation. Then, skill inheritance happened. Infantry units will always get access to a wider range of skills. Deirdre has gotten Vital Astra, the Ideal skills, and the new Speed Smoke skill as well. It's made his matchups look really good in comparison to Sigurd, who as a cav just doesn't get much. We're also seeing more power creep in the form of supportive skills. Think of all the units with +1 movement at this point. It makes Sigurd's gimmick a lot less powerful. Faye has had an interesting journey as well, but we'll get into her more. For now, I want to talk about the most powerful player phase unit in all of Faye. I told you all this was a good unit, but who am I kidding? I didn't know she was going to be this good. This unit is an amazing nuke, but she's a lot more. The combination of extra stats, huge debuffs, adaptive negation, and dragon effectiveness have made this unit simultaneously meta and anti-meta. The thing that really sets her apart though is the combination of the damage boost and miracle that's pretty much always on in her special. It's IS's version of giving us survivability, and look at the results. She only has 2 inconclusive matches, and one of them is against herself. I'm telling you guys right now, the null follow-up seal is completely overhyped, just not in this case. It was the piece that this unit needed to wreck stuff. We're not going to get into her enemy phase here, but suffice to say she makes Duo Chrom and most other duos look silly. The icing on the cake is seeing her level Duo Duma in one shot. This unit is the perfect combination of an amazing kit, special, and weapon. If you're starting from scratch, this is a unit you want. Did I mention her in-season matchups look amazing? This unit will serve you well as a one-off or a merge project. The next unit is fresh off an amazing refine and is good for a lot of the same reasons. This unit is a major reason why I do the ratings the way I do. I was honestly sleeping on just how good Legendary Julia is. This refine though, she keeps dragon effectiveness, which happens to be really good right now, but she gains 10 attack and res along with 4 speed and defense in most cases. Tack on a guaranteed follow-up and close counter versus dragons, along with debuffs, penalty neutralization, and adaptive negation from Light and Dark 2, and you have a formidable opponent. This unit won't have quite the staying power of Deirdre simply because her skills aren't as cutting edge, but she rewards those who merge her. Looking at her matchups, they look much the same as her mother. I remember the speed stacking versions of this unit from her release, and they're still just as terrifying. You're going to find that all the results from tier 0 are similar to this, with only 4 points separating the beginning and the ending of the tier, but I wanted to go over one more unit to really drive home a point. I needed you all to see exactly how good Legendary Ninian is. I've had the pleasure of using her in Arena this week, and it's silly how amazing she is. Making a dancer and refresher in one unit is already a ridiculously good combo. The fact that she also debuffs the enemy, gets extra stats, and in most cases gets a sweep effect is icing on the cake. It's interesting to me that Dragon's Ire 4 really is her best B skill. We'll see this more as time goes on, but there are units that she just can't outspeed. Dragon's Ire 4 gives her that dual phase guaranteed follow-up that really puts her over the top. Who decided that dragons were going to get all the new skills? She doesn't do as well in The Sims, but I highly recommend Defense Res Smoke 3. The addition of Pathfinder once she attacks is just silly in any mode. Her utilization in Summoner Duels and Aether Raids has yet to really be explored, but I promise you, this is a unit you want in your barracks. Looking at her in-season matchups, can I just say that it's mean that she counters Legendary Caeda? But it's time to skip down to Tier 1 and talk about one of my favorite units. Should Eitri even be a legendary unit? No, absolutely not. But she's here, and I love her. I wanted to go over this unit for several reasons. The first is to notice that you're just not seeing that big of a drop-off between Tier 0 to Tier 1. If you have any of these units, which include Claude, Byleth, Caeda, and Xander, you're doing really well. The biggest jump is from Lilina to Alm, where we go from 30 to 25, but even still, these are excellent units. Back to Eitri, there are a couple of reasons why I love this unit, but it's important to remember that Fire Emblem Heroes maps favor flyers. We see this in all the competitive modes from Summoner Duels to Arena to Aether Raids. There are also a lot of movement assist skills like Orders or Guidance that make flyers valuable long past their expiration date. Past that though, Eitri is a killing machine. We're a year into her life and she's still a terror. This plays out in these simulation results. You probably want to steer clear of red units, but past that, units mostly crater around her. The damage reduction and built-in retribution helps with this unit quite a bit. This goes back to investment recommendations though. Flyers may not get the skill inheritance they deserve, but they certainly get the map design, and should be higher on your list of options because of it. I want to move us into Tier 3 now and look at some results that are more colorful, just so you get an idea of what the matchups from tier to tier look like. Marth is a fascinating unit. This refine is just every skill they had at the time mushed into one unit. But by now, you all know what this unit can do, and you don't need me to read the text. The big thing I want to point out is the role player nature of units in this tier. You have units like Legendary Chrom and Corrin who are quite good in specific roles and have good matchups against key units like Duo Chrom. Even Legendary Lyn is a good unit if you skip the dual skill and use her preference A. Most of these units, however, are either on the downslope or are in need of a refine. I wouldn't suggest you invest in these units at this point unless their very specific role is valuable to you, and I wouldn't consider these good merge projects. Marth is an exception to this rule, and I'll show you why in a bit. There's one other tier to explore, and that's Tier 3. Let's dive into a unit that is hurting a bit right now. Legendary Robin fans, I feel for you. I know there are places where she really shines, but it takes a lot of work. I tried to go a few different ways with her kit and just nothing was working with that dual skill. The matchups are looking pretty rough too. She's one of the few legendary players with a negative player phase score. All in all, I think it took IS a while to get a handle on how to properly design legendary units. The difference between the first and second year designs is stark. We get into the third year and you get units like Dimitri that can have several renaissance moments. Robin's matchups are either inconclusive or losses to every unit except another legendary Robin. Somehow that just feels bad. I don't want to spend too much time here because I want to take a look at the enemy phase results now. If you needed the point driven home about the Colosseum being a player phase mode, this should do it. The two best enemy phase units score a mere 6 versus legendary Deirdre scoring a 38 in the player phase. Really, starting with the release of Lilina, legendary units became monstrous nukes. It's unfortunate for two of the legendaries that released right before this shift because Corrin and Seliph just cannot keep up. Even looking at units like Tiki, who can contribute in a limited fashion when combined with Hardy Fighter, are still just left in the dust. Because of this, in general, I weight enemy phase results much lighter than player phase. Marth and Hector both do a great job, and if you look at my history of legendary Hector, His use as a near savior can really save you, but I'm not suggesting you summon any legendary unit based on their enemy phase. Let's take a look at Marth and we can see what the matchups look like for a tier 0 unit in the enemy phase. For my Marth defenders out there, the first thing I have to say, he's much better without the dual skill. But you're going to see similar things with Marth and Hector's matchups. They're amazing because of how many inconclusives they can draw. This is actually an interesting strategy for those of us who still have to use GHBs as our bonus units. Being able to draw an enemy unit out and wear them down is not a small thing, but we're at a point in the meta where you'd much rather just KO the problem unit and buff your GHB into getting that last kill. I guess what I'm trying to say is, units like this are still usable, just don't go out of your way to get them. We'll talk more about remix value in a bit though. I want to move on to the most interesting unit in this entire analysis. I feel like IS did this on purpose. I come out and say Legendary Fae is one of the worst units from last year. They proceed to release the exact skills that this unit requires to become an absolute dominant force. This is a god amongst chickens. The biggest thing this unit got was Dragon's Ire 4, which was an absolutely amazing skill. Looking at this kit as a whole, this unit gets a -5 debuff to all stats, an additional -4 to attack and res, a guaranteed follow-up in both phases, defensive null follow-up, attack and res +7, and 5 true damage from her A skill. Whatever you put in her C skill, and the crazy miracle that is procced on turn 1. This is what drove this unit into tier 0 for the player phase, and what put her there for enemy phase as well. We talked about it, but infantry units get a wide range of inheritables. The problem with being a premier enemy phase unit is look at the actual matchups. Really look at them. She wins versus very few new legendaries. The other problem that we've seen a lot is how units age when their specials don't do damage. It puts a cap on a unit's ceiling. I will say that phase special synergizes really well with attack res finish to get that extra 5 damage. Still, it's interesting to see units like this come out of the blue. IS is really pushing the dragon agenda, and this unit is the beneficiary. Let's take a look at a truly unique unit though. I want to touch on Legendary Caeda just to put some comments to rest as to why I'm so high on her. I think the best summary I've seen on this unit is, when she works, she's amazing, and when she bombs hard. This unit is already a tier 1 player phase unit, but because she has Vantage and fixed Canto, it puts her in a very unique situation. Effective damage versus cavalry and armor units help quite a bit too. You can see she ends up with a strange amount of wins that normally she'd have no business getting. The big thing here is, I like unique units that can do things that others can't. This is a case study as to what happens, and she's quite powerful in most modes when used correctly. She also loses to Legendary Celica. This is the dichotomy of unique units right here, folks. This is another unit that I want to look at because of how unique she is. The combination of being very effective in combat while bringing something like anti-warping to the table can be an absolute game changer in modes outside of Coliseum. Obviously, Summoner Duels is a huge playground for this unit, but most Aether Raid strategies have become very reliant on warping as well. In either place, it can bring something unexpected, which is often what you need to get an easy win. I'll caution one thing. Remember when we talked about Legendary Sigurd at the very beginning of the episode? You need to be careful that your unique thing doesn't get power crept. Unlike Gatekeeper, this is a tier 1 unit in both the enemy and the player phase. But if they start offering warp inhibitors as a C skill, it changes the value of this unit dramatically. For now, I'm placing a premium on this unit, but it's the kind of unit that I worry about. Just look at the dragons of the past. It's never fun to invest in a cautionary tale. Hey, Robin fans, you good? Why am I harping on this unit? It's a great question. This is what units in tier 4 look like. They just lose to everyone. This is a good chance to bring up something though. All of these sims assume you're playing with these units in the Coliseum. Legendary Robin is a truly bad Coliseum unit, but she can be quite potent in other modes. Once you give her back her A skill, this unit can wreck stuff in both Summoner Duels and Aether Raids. My point is this, There is a place for every unit in this game. IS has been excellent about giving us inheritables that let us keep using our favorites. Let me remind you that I'm using Arden in every game mode right now, and he's dominating. It just took a lot of TLC to get him up and running. But enough of that. Let's look at the results and get my face off the screen because we need more room. This is revision 9 of this final list. The hard part is how heavily do you weight scoring, but you've already seen how these units fall out in regards to combat. It's not a coincidence that every one of the top units does something unique though. It's not enough right now to just be good at killing things or even to just be a good support. If I'm being honest, we almost need another tier that I just call Ninian. She's that good, folks. The other units in this tier are Miracle Dragon Slayers, Warp Inhibitors, Armor Piercers, Survival Queens, Vantage Users, or they ride on a big gun. Tier 1 is when we get into the Combat Heroes. All of these units are good at just crushing things, and most of them have something special about them. Lilina's Hardy Bearing, Byleth's Drive NFU, Claude's Gravity, and even Crom is a refresher. And yes, Sigurd is up there too, despite me being down on him. He's still a very unique unit. In case you're wondering, I wanted to put Dimitri into tier 0 so badly. There are two things. He requires a ton of investment, which really shouldn't matter, but it's worth considering. In the end though, even with stellar matchups in both phases, he doesn't have that special thing that the other units in Tier 0 do. Tier 2 units are mainly older legendaries that can still perform a role. A great example is Gunthra. Under the right circumstances, it's amazing what that unit can kill. Ephraim is another who can do very well in Gale Force teams. Then you've got Ellawood, who is about to get a refine and could very likely climb this chart. Tier 3 is filled with units that are just struggling, and to be honest, you should steer clear of. They have roles that they can excel at, but it just takes a lot of work. If you're mad at me for putting your unit down here, just remember that I am the proud owner of a +10 legendary Seliph. I feel your suffering, but I also still use him a lot and love him. I want to talk about one more thing, and that's investments. I hesitated putting this up here for one very good reason. Very few of us actually choose the legendaries we have. Most of the time they choose us. If you look back at the main tier list, just make sure they're in tier 0 or 1 and you'll be fine. But if you're starting from a blank sheet of paper, these are the units that I'd want to choose me. They're excellent units and can be used outside of the Coliseum, but that's pretty obvious from the simulation results in the tier list. This isn't a big surprise. I want to talk about the second portion of this, the remixes. All of these units are excellent in their own right, and you'd be happy to have them in your barracks, but I want to warn you of something. These units are good Coliseum core candidates if you already have them in your barracks and just need a few more. If these units chose you in the past and you need a score boost, go get them. If you're looking at getting a unit merged up from scratch, the difference in cost between, say, Ninian and Azura is in the range of 400 orbs on average. That's basically saying if you waited and saved an extra 2 months, you'd have a premier legendary that will have years more life. If you have the choice, pick the latest. Every unit in FE has an expiration date, except for Old Man Brave Hector. If you'd like to hear more of an in-depth analysis on wind and fire, I've linked both of these videos here. Take care and schedule an appointment with your FEHologist real soon.